There's nothing wrong with being scared, Norman. As long as you don't let it change who you are. ParaNorman.
ParaNorman is the best movie that Laika Studios has ever made, in my opinion. Yeah, I said it. I think it's better than Coraline, The Box Trolls, Kubo the Two Strings, and oh yeah, they made that movie, didn't they? Now, if you're an animation fan who's blissfully unaware of what this movie is, just know that it is a stop-motion animated film from Laika Studios that holds such a significant place in my heart that I can't help but think of it as Laika's best film. That is, at time of recording. We'll see how things pan out. Man, I hope this movie's good. Now, however, in this film, I want to focus on why I think ParaNorman is the best film that Laika has ever made, and explain to you why I think you should think that as well. So, with all that said, sit down, get comfortable, maybe have some popcorn, and let's get into it. Laika Studios. It's one of my favourite studios, because of course, many things spring to mind whenever the name is mentioned, be it because of their funny little stop-motion films, or their infamous childhood scarrings. I would say it was around the late to the early 2010s that Laika Studios first started to become a household name, with of course its first childhood scarring, Coraline. Laika officially got its first start in 2005 when it was founded by its CEO, Travis Knight. Figures that the guy who would direct the best live-action Transformers film also created the best stop-motion animation studio out there. Like I said before, Laika got its start in 2005, and the studio got its name from the Soviet Union's furry cosmonaut of the same name, which, by the way, is a long story. Anyway, the studio's first film was Coraline in 2009. Although many of the creators who came together to create Coraline did get their starts earlier, like with the film's director, Henry Selick, who previously directed another famous stop-motion animated film, that of course being The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, in 2005, Travis Knight founded Laika Studios, and with this, he decided to create a studio that focused on two things: stop-motion animation and fantastic storytelling. His studio would therefore be more willing to focus on exploring darker themes and more mature tones for their stories, which isn't really something you see in the more theatrical side of the animation industry. A lot of the stuff that releases in theatres is generally made to be more welcoming to all types of larger audiences. However, Laika Studios was willing to do something different. Now, in the beginning, Laika Studios, and to this day, consisted of many fantastic attributes and many fantastic creatives, who all came together to create the fantastic success that was their first film, with Coraline. Either that or some sort of deal with the devil was involved, but there ain't too much evidence about that. So we're just going to move on and say that Laika Studios had a fantastic first start. Okay, so with all that said, there's still a hell of a lot more to Laika's story, the founding of its studio, and its journey from what it was to becoming what it is today. But all of that could probably be an entire documentary all in and of itself, so I'll probably just have to get round to making that some other day. Now, I'm sure that it wouldn't be controversial to say that Laika Studios are a pioneer of stop-motion animation, but also a pioneer of animated horror, focused on being imaginative and fun. Mostly. Laika Studios got its start with a film that explored animated horror and stop-motion animation, with that film of course being Coraline. In an interview with Henry Selick for the 3D re-release of Coraline, he said this:
"It's important that there be fairy tales and cautionary tales. Why would the Grimm's fairy tales have lasted so long or be so successful? It's the old lady at the door of the cave warning the kids, you go out there, you're gonna get eaten by a bear, and here's how it might happen. So don't go out. Or if you are, bring friends." It's very important that there be good scares in films for kids, but it's also just as important that the kids can triumph, that they can go into the darkness and come out safe the other side.
This is something that I wholeheartedly agree with. Creating a scary film that's for kids isn't just solely about attempting to scare or traumatize kids. Seriously, we have the internet and Twitter for that. Also, I'm still not going to call it X. Instead, I'm sure, scratch that, I know, that the real intent of these stories are to entertain and teach valuable life lessons to their audiences. In the same interview that you just saw, Henry Selick likened the importance of scary animated films and scary animated films in general for young audiences to that of Grimm's fairy tales. Coraline and the story of Hansel and Gretel are both inherently scary tales, but in their scares, there is an importance and meaning to the scares. Like Hansel and Gretel, Coraline utilises its scares to enhance the importance of the film's message. In Hansel and Gretel, the scares promote the story's themes about the dangers of greed, and in Coraline, the film's scares promote the themes of family and valuing what you have. Now, in saying all this, I hope that you have a good understanding of not only Laika Studios, but also the great way that the studio uses scares to enhance their films, their stories, and their themes. It's these main aspects of Laika's productions that sets the studio's biggest films, Coraline and ParaNorman, apart from their competition. In the animation world today, there aren't many studios that are willing to go as far with their ideas as Laika are. At least, not that I think anyway. A lot of studios today want the largest audiences they can have for their films, which I think kinda degrades their films a little, but still, I recognise that it's to each their own, so I'm just glad that we at least have Laika Studios still. Honestly, Disney isn't out there intentionally scarring childhoods, at least not intentionally anyway. And on the topic of childhood scarrings, I think it's finally time to get to my two favourite films from Laika Studios. Laika have made their fair share of films over the lifetime of their studio. However, in saying this, I'm somewhat sure that I won't get too much pushback when I say that the studio's two films that most people will know them for would have to be Coraline and, of course, ParaNorman. Even if you just briefly look around the internet today, you can still see that there is a lot of interest in both of these films, through fan art, fan games, memes, and cosplays. And it's not hard to see why. The films are beautiful, fantastically made triumphs of animation. However, I still think that, of course, one is better than the other, and I'm sure you can guess which one that is. It's probably because I've already told you. Coraline and ParaNorman are brilliantly written, scary stop-motion movies that both feature a young child protagonist that has to overcome some sort of scary, monstrous threat. And yes, I recognise that might have been a little bit of a oversimplified synopsis of the stories of these films, but hey, we're going with it. Seriously, both of these films are fantastic. Their writing is phenomenal, they look brilliant, and they have a lot of great characters. But still, in saying all this praise, I think that ParaNorman is better than Coraline, largely because of the way that the film chooses to use its monsters. And now I'll explain what I mean in saying this. Okay, so in Coraline, the main monster and main villain is the Other Mother. And honestly, the Other Mother is such a terrifying threat that I can only assume that Laika Studios opened a gateway into hell, reached down into the darkest depths of the underworld, and plucked out the first hideous monster they could find to be their film's central villain. In Coraline, the Other Mother is central to the film's themes of family and valuing what you have. The Other Mother does whatever she can to entice Coraline to stay with her. She plays every strategy she can think of to manipulate Coraline and distract her from thinking for herself. It's all brilliant and great to watch. In the end of the film, however, Coraline has realised the value in what she has and the family that she already has, which in the end defeats the Other Mother, leaving her with no way to force Coraline to stay with her, without, of course, transforming into and revealing her true and monstrous form. Also, yes, this was one of the first movie villains that did actually scar my childhood. Thanks, Laika. Now, I think that the overall way that the other mother and Coraline are written is great. However, I do think that it eventually comes at a cost. What with the way that the other mother is written. Her time in the movie is split between her being both a twisted monster and a cunning manipulator. Honestly, when I watched Coraline as a kid, I was terrified by how the other mother transforms at the end of the movie and then just becomes this terrible monster. However, nowadays when I go back and rewatch the movie, she's not as interesting once she transforms, and I'm more scared of just how she acts when she's not in her terrible monster mode. But still, that idea might differ from person to person. But still, keep that in mind. Norman's uncle returns as a ghost to warn him of the danger of the witch's return, before the night begins and the dead rise as apparent servants of the witch. The danger of the witch's return builds constantly throughout the movie. Norman's uncle returns to warn Norman, of course, the dead rise to serve, and a giant manifestation of the witch lingers over the town before we finally get to the scene.
How could you? She was just a little kid.
The truth is finally revealed, and the audience gets to see the terrible monster the town has been so afraid of. And in reality, it's nothing more than a child. Remember, if you've seen ParaNorman, you've experienced all of the build-up to this point, and now you're getting the payoff. You get both the monsters and you get the character. This young girl, who was guilty of no real crime, was carelessly taken from her mother and sentenced to death. The girl lived with a gift she didn't understand, and in turn, the town couldn't understand her, so they chose to fear her. This little girl was never destined to be a monster. Perhaps if she was given a chance, she could have learned to understand her gift, just as Norman did, and things could have been different. But of course, she wasn't. The monsters in ParaNorman are central to the themes and ideas of the movie. ParaNorman shows the dangers of misunderstanding others, unchecked rampant fear, acceptance, and revisionist history. The court of characters that sentence this little girl to death, they all think that they're doing the right thing. The town that rejoices in the history of this story, they all think that they're doing the right thing. And in reality, well, things get a little murky. And all of this, it all mixes together and creates a story that is just so interesting that it couldn't be what it is without the monsters of this film having the character that they do. The town executed the girl and attempted to justify their actions with the story of the evil witch hanged by the town. In life, she was feared as a monster, and in death, she was so full of anger that she would become the monster that so many feared. Finally embracing the anger, she was eventually able to return to take her revenge on the dead and the living. But still, even here it's important to remember that this film's themes of rampant unchecked fear, they run through this character as well. This character who is so fearful that she might miss out on her justice, her revenge, or just what she is becoming. They lead her to become this monster that she probably would have stayed as if it weren't for Norman. She meets Norman and is reminded of something so important that she is eventually able to again be the little girl that she once was. And with this, she and the dead can finally rest. Yes, ParaNorman as a movie has its own monsters, just like Coraline. but ParaNorman takes the opportunity to show the humanity of its monsters. There's no one villain in ParaNorman, but instead characters that are so corrupted by fear and anger that it's this humanity that allows Norman to connect with the dead and help them to move on. When the injustice is laid bare, the truth revealed, and a story told. I like and I think that ParaNorman is better than Coraline because of all of this. And as good as the other mother is, she just can't compete with the humanity on stage in ParaNorman. And of course I know that ParaNorman is doing a lot more with its story than Coraline, and I think that the stories are so different that it's a little hard to compare both films, but still, in just comparing the monsters and the way that the film uses them, I think there is a little bit of a through line that someone can draw for a discussion like this. Maybe one day I'll make a video breaking down and discussing both films on a larger scale, but for the moment, in just talking about this one topic, I have to say that I do like ParaNorman's monsters better. The zombies, the witch, all of these monsters are also characters, and all of them have their own thoughts, ideas, their own ways of expressing themselves, and they all do so many different things for the story. Of course, the other mother does the same sort of thing, and she also has a lot of different types of monster character around her, but unfortunately I just don't think that they get enough screen time to be able to do the same sort of thing that ParaNorman does with its monsters. Or at least they just aren't given enough emphasis on screen to emphasize a lot of what they think with just their actions and what they do in the film. Growing up, ParaNorman was my favourite stop-motion animated scary film. And honestly, I think it's not too hard to see why, especially not with how I've just explained to you why I think all of this is why. But still, even in just watching the films, I think that if you watch them for yourselves, you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. So, with all that said, I'm going to ask you all to go out there and watch these films for yourselves, then come back and let me know what you thought. Or, if you've seen the films already, let me know what you thought. Tell me what you think in the comments section below. Let me know if I'm onto something here, or if you think I'm just making shit up as I go along. But still, thank you all for watching, like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.